That moment my hand touched my daughter's doorknob. I had no idea. I was seconds away from discovering a plot that would redefine every memory I had of our family and turn my own daughter into a stranger. The voice came sharp and urgent from across the street. "Don't go in there!" It shouted, freezing me just as my fingers closed around the cool brass knob of my daughter, Clara's front door. I turned to see a man in his 40s hurrying toward me, his face carved with lines of concern that seemed too deep for a casual warning. His eyes held a story I couldn't possibly comprehend in that single glance. 5 minutes later, standing on that perfectly manicured lawn in an Orlando suburb, my entire understanding of family, trust, and love would shatter into pieces I'm still trying to gather. My wife Eleanor had been visiting our daughter Clara and her husband, Mark, for exactly 1 week. What began as a typical mother-daughter visit had morphed into something ominous when Eleanor's daily calls suddenly stopped. The silence felt heavy, like a wrong note in the familiar rhythm of our 30-year marriage. The highway stretched before me that morning, a gray ribbon of anxiety connecting Tampa to Orlando. My knuckles stood out pale and bloodless against the steering wheel's black leather. 3 days. Eleanor never went 3 days without calling. Not when our own parents passed, not during hurricanes, not even during our rare arguments. My last voicemail played in my mind, my own voice sounding thin and desperate in the quiet car. "Ellie, please, just tell me you're okay." The surprise visit had felt like a smart idea yesterday, a romantic gesture even, showing up with flowers to take my girls out for lunch. But somewhere around mile marker 68, the surprise began feeling less like a gift and more like an emergency response to a crisis I couldn't yet name. Clara's neighborhood presented the perfect picture of suburban tranquility. Manicured lawns stretched toward identical 2-story homes, basketball hoops stood sentinel in driveways, and minivans parked at careful angles. Her house, positioned at the end of a cul-de-sac, looked particularly pristine with its freshly mowed lawn showing perfect, parallel stripes. Nothing appeared disturbed or wrong, yet the silence emanating from within felt absolute, threatening. I pulled to the curb and killed the engine, sitting for a moment in the sudden quiet. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Eleanor had dropped her phone in the pool or left it in a restaurant. Simple explanations existed. They had to. I grasped at these possibilities like lifelines as I walked to the front door. The concrete path felt solid under my shoes. Normal. I reached for the doorbell, pressing it and hearing the chime echo inside. I counted to 30, then pressed again. Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. Cupping my hands against the front window, I peered through the glass into the living room. Everything stood arranged exactly as I remembered from our Christmas visit, but a fine layer of dust caught the light on the coffee table. No lights on, no movement, no signs of life. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed Clara's number. It rang 4 times before dropping to voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice a stark contrast to the growing dread in my chest. "Hey, this is Clara. Can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back super soon." I didn't leave a message. Instead, I tried Mark's number with the same result, straight to voicemail after several rings. His message was businesslike, clipped. "Mark Evans, leave your name and number." The unease that had been building since Tampa crystallized into something sharper, colder. Where were they? Clara knew I might visit. I'd mentioned it during our last conversation. She always answered her phone, always. "Excuse me, sir." The voice came again, closer this time. I turned to see the same man from across the street, slightly breathless as he reached me. "Your family, right? Eleanor's husband?" The question stopped me cold, my blood turning to ice in my veins. How did this stranger know Eleanor's name? "I'm Leo Patterson," he said, extending a hand automatically while his eyes remained fixed on Clara's house. I live next door. He gestured toward the colonial-style home to the left. Listen, I need to tell you something. About last Tuesday, he described the screams first, not argumentative yelling. He insisted, but pure terror. A woman's voice begging, pleading for someone to call an ambulance, saying she needed help. Her heart was racing. My own chest tightened as he spoke, the ground seeming to shift subtly beneath my feet. I got up, went to my front window, Leo continued, his jaw working as he chose his words carefully. Clara and Mark came outside right there on the lawn. They were telling anyone who would listen that everything was fine. Just a nightmare. No emergency needed. He shook his head, his expression grim. But that screaming? I've heard nightmares wake people up. This was different. This was terror. What did you do? The question came out hoarse, strained. I called 911 anyway, he said, his voice firm with conviction. Told them someone needed help at this address. Clara and Mark saw me on the phone through my window and started waving at me to stop, but I'd already made the call. He crossed his arms, defensive now as if expecting criticism. The paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later. They went inside with Clara and Mark. When they came back out, he paused, meeting my eyes directly. They had a woman on a stretcher. She could barely lift her head. It was Eleanor. The world narrowed to Leo's face, his mouth forming words that couldn't possibly be real. She was barely conscious, he continued. The paramedics were moving fast, checking her vitals, asking questions. Your daughter and her husband just stood there watching. Didn't get in the ambulance. Didn't even follow it to the hospital. They went back inside, and the next morning, both their cars were gone. Haven't seen them since. My hands began shaking. I looked down at them, surprised by the tremor, then back at Leo. Which hospital? I don't know, he admitted, faltering slightly. I assumed family would handle it, that someone would contact you. I pulled out my phone, dialing. Clara again. Voicemail. Mark. Voicemail. Then I called emergency services, forcing my voice, steady as I identified myself, and asked about ambulance calls to this address 1 week prior. The dispatcher put me on hold, cheerful music playing incongruously through the speaker. Leo stood watching me, his concern etched deeper now that he'd unburdened himself. A different voice came on the line. Emergency services. How can I help you? I'm calling about an ambulance dispatched to 847 Meadowbrook Lane last Tuesday, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The patient was my wife, Eleanor Morgan. I need to know which hospital she was taken to. Keys clicked on the other end. Orlando Regional Medical Center, sir. The call came in at 12:43 a.m. Thank you. I hung up and immediately dialed the hospital. 3 transfers, 3 different voices asking me to hold. Finally, a nurse in the ICU with a tired, professional tone. Eleanor Morgan. Yes, she was admitted last Tuesday. Serious condition but stable as of this morning. What happened to her? I can't provide details over the phone, sir. You'll need to come in person. Are you family? I'm her husband. A pause. 4th floor ICU. Ask for the charge nurse when you arrive. I lowered the phone. Leo was watching me, waiting. I'm calling the police, I told him. This isn't right. He nodded immediately. I'll give a statement. Whatever you need. I dialed the Orlando Police Department, reported a possible crime, gave them the address, explained what Leo had witnessed. The officer told me someone would meet me at the hospital. I was already moving toward my car. The hospital's on Colonial, Leo called after me. Orlando Regional Medical Center. Take Highway 50 East. I'll find it, I said, pulling away from the curb without looking back. The drive felt surreal. Traffic lights changed colors. People crossed streets with shopping bags and coffee cups. going about ordinary Tuesdays while my entire world cracked open. What happened to Eleanor? Why wouldn't Clara call an ambulance for her own mother? Why did they run? Questions multiplied faster than my speedometer climbed. Orlando Regional Medical Center rose against the skyline, all glass and concrete angles. I parked in the visitor lot, took the elevator to the 4th floor, followed signs to the ICU. A woman in plainclothes was waiting near the nurse's station, a detective's badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. Morgan?" She extended her hand. "Detective Lisa Miller, Orlando PD. I got the call about your wife's situation. Where is she?" "Room 412. But I need to ask you some questions first. When did you last speak with Eleanor?" 2 weeks ago when she left to visit our daughter. We texted a few times after that. Then 3 days ago she stopped responding. I watched her write in a small notebook. "And you didn't know she was hospitalized?" "Nobody contacted me. I came here because I was worried. A neighbor told me what happened." Her expression shifted, the professional mask slipping just enough to show something darker underneath. "Your wife suffered severe poisoning, Mr. Morgan, a combination of sedatives and cardiac medication. The dose was potentially lethal. She's been unconscious for most of the week. We've been trying to locate next of kin." The words landed like physical blows. "My daughter and son-in-law were with her," I said slowly. "The neighbor heard her screaming for help. They told him it was nothing. Then they disappeared." I met her eyes directly. "Does that sound like an accident to you, Detective?" Miller's jaw tightened. "Room 412. Go see your wife. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." The IQ room was dim, curtains half drawn. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals with mechanical precision. Eleanor lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment I didn't want to understand. Her face looked smaller than I remembered, skin pale against white pillows. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones. "I'm here now," I said quietly. The words meant for her even if she couldn't hear them. "When you wake up, you'll tell me what they did. And I promise you," my voice dropped lower, harder, "I'll make sure they answer for every second of this." Something shifted inside me then. The shocked father evaporated. In his place stood the federal investigator I'd been for 35 years, the man who built cases brick by brick, who found patterns in chaos, who knew exactly how to make people accountable for their actions. Clara and Mark had made a critical mistake. They'd left evidence. They'd left witnesses. They'd left their victim alive, and they'd underestimated me. I didn't leave the chair beside her bed. Nurses offered alternatives, a cot in the waiting room, a nearby hotel with a discount for families, but I refused. My hand stayed wrapped around Eleanor's, feeling for any change, any sign she was coming back. Somewhere around 5 a.m., her fingers twitched against my palm. I straightened, leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling against whatever darkness held her. A nurse noticed, moved quickly to the monitors, checked readings, pressed a call button. Within minutes, a doctor arrived, pen light in hand, examining Eleanor's responses with clinical efficiency. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, pupils adjusting to the dim light. Then they found my face and held there. "Robert?" The word came out rough, barely recognizable through the damage a ventilator tube leaves behind. "Where?" The nurse brought water, held the cup while Eleanor took small sips. Her throat worked painfully, but gradually sound returned. "How long have I been here?" "A week." The words felt inadequate. Her eyes widened, confusion bleeding into fear. I watched her trying to piece together time she'd lost, reaching for memories that scattered like smoke. The doctor confirmed she was stable enough to talk. Detective Miller appeared shortly after, recording device in hand, expression professional but not unkind. Eleanor described what she could remember, voice shaking through the account. Clara made dinner last Tuesday, she said, staring at her hands as if they held the memory. Pasta with vegetables, garlic bread. About an hour after eating, something went wrong. Dizziness first, then nausea. Then my heart racing so fast I couldn't catch my breath. She looked up, her eyes haunted. I asked Clara to call an ambulance. She said no. Said it was just food poisoning, that I'd feel better if I lay down. But it got worse. Everything was spinning and my chest hurt so much. She stopped, swallowed hard. I begged her. I said, Clara, please. Something's wrong with my heart. She just looked at Mark, and he stood in front of the door. Wouldn't let me leave the room. I sat motionless, absorbing each word like a blow to the chest. I screamed for help, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength with anger. I thought maybe someone outside would hear. Then everything went dark. I remember a voice through the window, someone calling out, but after that, nothing. Just waking up here now. Detective Miller stopped the recording, gave Eleanor a moment before speaking. The toxicology shows levels of zolpidem and digoxin that would kill most people your age. Mrs. Morgan, someone with medical knowledge would understand exactly what this combination does. This wasn't accidental, she paused. Do you know if Clara or Mark had access to those drugs? Eleanor's forehead creased in thought. There were pill bottles in their bathroom. I saw them when I first arrived. Mark mentioned something about anxiety and trouble sleeping, but I didn't pay much attention. The detective made notes, asked follow-up questions, established timeline details that would matter in court. I listened, building my own mental file of every fact, every inconsistency. I need to conduct interviews, Miller said eventually. Clara and Mark Evans just returned to their Orlando home. Apparently, they took a trip. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm coming with you, I said, already standing. Mr. Morgan, this is official police business. Given your relationship to the victim and the suspects, they're not suspects. They're criminals who tried to murder my wife. Miller's expression softened slightly. Which is exactly why you can't be present during questioning. I understand your frustration, but we need to do this right. Let me handle it. She was correct, and I knew it. Decades in law enforcement had taught me the importance of clean investigations, untainted evidence. I sat back down, the leather chair creaking under my weight. Hours passed. Eleanor drifted in and out of sleep, exhausted by the effort of consciousness. I held her hand, watched machines track her vital signs, tried not to imagine Mark standing between her and the door while she begged for help. Detective Miller returned late afternoon. Her expression told me everything before she spoke. They admit Eleanor was sick that night, she said, pulling up a chair. But their story is that she took the pills herself, said she couldn't sleep, was stressed about family finances. They claimed they were about to call an Anzo ambulance when the neighbor, quote, interfered. They left for the Bahamas the next day because the trip was pre-planned and they didn't realize how serious the situation was since. The hospital said Eleanor was stable. That's a lie. Eleanor's voice was stronger now, but trembling with anger. I believe you, Miller said. But their story is coordinated, rehearsed. A defense attorney could argue the poisoning caused confusion, affected your memory of events. Right now, it's your word against theirs. We need more. After she left, I sat in silence. 35 years in federal investigation had prepared me for this moment, though I'd never imagined applying that knowledge to my own family. I knew investigation could take months. Evidence could be circumstantial. Even if charges were filed, conviction wasn't guaranteed. And meanwhile, Clara and Mark would walk free, acting innocent, telling their version to anyone who'd listen. I looked at Eleanor, frail and traumatized in the hospital bed. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Diana Webb, private investigator who'd worked dozens of cases with me during my federal days, digging up financial records and hidden connections that turned circumstantial cases into convictions. I pressed dial. Diana, it's Robert Morgan. I need your help with something. It's personal. The coffee shop in Tampa was nearly empty on Thursday morning. Diana Webb sat across from me, 3 file folders spread between our cups, her expression grim as she walked me through what she'd found in just 2 days. Your daughter made 47 calls to creditors in the past 3 months, she said, sliding the first folder forward. Collection agencies, credit card companies, mortgage servicers. Every account is past due, most by 60 days or more. I opened the folder. Phone records, bank statements, credit reports, all the financial debris of a life falling apart. Mark owed money everywhere. Online gambling sites, sports betting, poker rooms in Orlando and Miami. The numbers kept climbing. $85,000 in credit card debt, Diana continued. Another $120,000 in gambling losses across various platforms. Their mortgage is 2 months overdue. Foreclosure proceedings started last week. She paused, meeting my eyes. And Clara knew all this. I asked, though I already suspected the answer. How do you know? She called your estate attorney 4 weeks before the poisoning, Diana said, her voice flat. Asked about probate timelines. What happens when someone dies intestate versus with a will, whether adult children automatically inherit. She let that hang in the air between us. The attorney thought she was just curious about family planning. Another pause. That's not curiosity, Robert. That's planning. I closed the folder, the pieces falling into a pattern I recognized from dozens of investigations. Financial desperation plus opportunity equals motive. But knowing it and proving it in court were different challenges. From the coffee shop, I drove to Sarah Jenkins's office downtown. Jenkins had been my go-to for complex cases requiring civil litigation expertise, the kind of attorney who understood how to apply pressure from multiple angles. Her office overlooked Tampa Bay, floor-to-ceiling windows framing sailboats drifting across blue water. Jenkins sat behind her desk reading Diana's report with the focused intensity that made her successful. Criminal court requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, she said finally. The DA might struggle with that, given the coordinated alibi and Eleanor's memory gaps. She looked up, her eyes sharp. But civil court? Preponderance of evidence, 51%. We can prove this on civil grounds even if criminal charges fail, and we can make their lives very uncomfortable in the process. What are you suggesting? Wrongful injury lawsuit, emotional distress, medical expenses. We freeze their assets during discovery. Force them to answer questions under oath. Expose every financial motive to the criminal investigators. She leaned back, fingers steepled. Civil litigation can be a powerful weapon when used strategically. And I assume you want this done aggressively. I want it done correctly, I said. But yes, aggressively. Jenkins smiled, not warmth, but recognition of shared purpose. I'll have papers drawn up by end of day. My next stop was the estate attorney's office, a smaller practice near Hyde Park. Gerald Simmons had handled our wills 5 years ago. Straightforward documents that left everything to each other, then to Clara after we both passed. I need changes, I told him after explaining the situation. Remove Clara completely. Everything goes to Eleanor, then to Charity if she predeceases me. And add language that if Clara contests this will, she forfeits any claim whatsoever. Gerald's pen moved across a legal pad, taking notes. You want a no contest clause? Standard practice when there's concern about challenges. I can have a revised will ready for signature tomorrow. Today, I said. I'll wait. He nodded, understanding the urgency without needing explanation. Back home that evening, Eleanor sat in our living room, discharged from the hospital earlier that day. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a blanket despite Tampa's heat. I'd shown her Diana's report over dinner, or tried to. She'd put the folder down after 3 pages. She called about the will a month before this happened. Her voice was hollow, processing facts that contradicted everything she'd believed about our daughter. She actually planned it. The evidence suggests so. I kept telling you she was just going through a rough time, that she'd never... Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. I was so wrong. I sat beside her, careful not to touch her without permission. Hospital experiences leave invisible boundaries. You weren't wrong to love your daughter. She was wrong to betray that love. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Eleanor straightened, something hardening in her expression. What's the next step? I explained Jenkins's strategy, the civil lawsuit, the asset freeze, the discovery process that would expose everything. Eleanor listened without interruption, then nodded once. Do it. Friday morning, I called Clara's number. She answered on the second ring, voice carefully bright. Dad, how's Mom doing? I've been so worried. Your mother needs family right now, I interrupted, keeping my tone neutral. I think we should talk, all of us together, face to face. Can you and Mark come to Tampa this weekend? We need to work through what happened. A pause. I could almost hear her calculating, deciding how to play this. Of course, she said finally. We want to help however we can. Saturday work? Saturday's perfect. Come around noon. After I hung up, I signed the authorization form for Jenkins's lawsuit. Monday morning, Clara and Mark would be served with papers. But first, I wanted to see their faces when they thought they'd gotten away with it. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote my name. Not regret, just recognition of the moment when everything would change. The civil complaint sat on my desk, 38 pages of allegations that read like an indictment, which in a sense it was. Sarah Jenkins had done excellent work. Every charge supported by medical records, every dollar of damages calculated precisely. $2 million in compensatory and punitive damages for attempted murder, intentional infliction of emotional distress, medical expenses approaching $200,000. Jenkins's voice came through the speakerphone. We file within the hour. Once the process server delivers this to their door, there's no walking it back. You certain about this? File it, I said. Understood. I'll call you after service is complete. I hung up and pictured the scene. Process server approaching Clara's house, knocking on the door, handing over the thick manila envelope. Her opening it, scanning the first page, seeing the words attempted murder and $2 million in bold type. The satisfaction I felt was cold, methodical. This was step 1. The call came 3 hours later. Not from Jenkins, but from Clara. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice level. Yes, $2 million. Her scream came through sharp enough to hurt. Dad, have you lost your mind? This is insane. It was an accident. Mom took those pills herself because she couldn't sleep. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. The same rehearsed explanation she'd given the detective. I let her continue, listening for inconsistencies, cataloging every claim. We were trying to help her. She was stressed about money, about the house, and she took too many pills. We were about to call for help when that nosy neighbor interfered. Now you're suing us? Your own daughter? She paused for breath. I spoke into the silence. You had a choice that night, Clara, when your mother was screaming for help, begging you to call an ambulance. You made a choice. You chose to let her suffer. Now you'll answer for that choice in court. Her tone shifted instantly from hysteria to fury. You're destroying my life over nothing. We're your family. Family doesn't let family die for inheritance money. I ended the call. 20 minutes passed before my phone rang again. Mark this time. I answered without greeting. His voice came out careful, modulated, the tone of someone trying to negotiate a business deal. Robert, listen. I know this looks bad, but we can work this out, right? Family should handle things privately. What if there's a way to make this go away? We could agree to certain terms, maybe some financial arrangement. I walked to the window, looked out at Tampa's downtown skyline while Mark's desperate pitch continued. When he finally stopped, I responded. You're offering me money with what? The $85,000 you owe on credit cards? The $120,000 in gambling debts? Or were you planning to use the inheritance you thought you'd get when Eleanor died? Silence. Then, in a voice stripped of its careful tone, how do you? What are you talking about? I didn't answer the question. There's no deal, Mark. See you in court. Another hang-up. Detective Miller called that afternoon. We executed the search warrant this morning. Found some interesting items. Go on. Empty prescription bottle in the master bathroom medicine cabinet. Zolpidem sleeping pills prescribed to Mark 3 months ago. 30 pills. Bottles completely empty, and his fingerprints are all over it. She paused. But here's the real evidence. Mark's laptop. Browser history from 3 weeks before the poisoning. Searches for digoxin overdose symptoms and lethal sleeping pill dose. He researched exactly what happened to your wife before it happened. That's premeditation, I said, making notes while she talked. The DA is preparing arrest warrants, Miller continued. Attempted murder first degree for both of them, plus conspiracy and obstruction for the false statements. We're moving on this tonight. Keep me informed. We will. The second call from Miller came at 7 that evening. They're in custody, both arrested at home an hour ago, being processed now. Bail hearings tomorrow morning, but given the charges and their financial situation creating flight risk, bond will be set high. Eleanor was beside me, holding my hand. She'd heard everything through the speaker. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Is it wrong that I feel relieved? She asked quietly. I squeezed her hand. No, it means justice is working. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenkins. Arrest warrants executed. Civil case now has criminal charges backing it. Asset freeze motion hearing scheduled for 3 days from now. We're winning. I read the message, then looked at Eleanor. She was staring at a framed photo on the side table. Clara at age 7, gap-toothed smile, sitting on my shoulders at the beach. Eleanor reached for it, hesitated with her fingers an inch from the frame, then deliberately turned it face down. I can't look at her right now, she whispered. I nodded. Neither could I. The bail hearing happened Wednesday morning. Clara and Mark appeared via video link from the county jail, both in orange jumpsuits that looked deliberately humiliating on camera. The judge set bond at $250,000 each high, but not insurmountable. By Thursday afternoon, they posted bail through a bondsman, pledging their house as collateral. By Friday, they'd retained Michael Brennan. Brennan's reputation preceded him, former public defender turned high-profile criminal attorney, known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. His strategy became clear within hours of taking the case. The Tampa Tribune ran the story on Saturday morning. Front page, below the fold. Father sues daughter for $2 million after alleged poisoning. Defense claims. Tragic accident. The article presented both sides with careful neutrality, but the photo told a different story. Clara looking exhausted and fragile, tears visible on her cheeks. No photo of Eleanor in the hospital bed. Sunday brought the real attack. The Tribune published a follow-up interview. Clara and Mark sitting in their living room, speaking directly to a reporter about the tragic misunderstanding. tearing their family apart. I read it at the kitchen table while Eleanor prepared breakfast. Clara described a wonderful visit with her mother that took a terrible turn when Eleanor became anxious about finances and took sleeping pills without telling anyone. Mark explained they were moments away from calling for help when the neighbor panicked unnecessarily. Both expressed shock and hurt that I refused to believe them, choosing instead to destroy my own daughter's life with false accusations. The article included quotes from their attorney. Brennan positioned them as victims twice over, first of Eleanor's accidental overdose, now of my vindictive lawsuit, fueled by paranoia rather than evidence. Listen to this, I said to Eleanor. Brennan claims we're weaponizing the legal system to punish grief-stricken family members who made difficult decisions in a crisis. Eleanor sat down, her coffee cup hitting the table harder than necessary. Difficult decisions? They watched me beg for help and did nothing. She looked at me, her expression pained. I know. Then why does reading this make me feel like we're the ones who did something wrong? Because that's exactly what Brennan wants, I said. Shape the narrative before trial. Make the jury pool question whether attempted murder was really just panic and poor judgment. Classic defense strategy. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Friends, mostly former colleagues from my federal days, people who'd known me for decades, calling with carefully worded questions. Richard Martinez, retired judge, spoke with diplomatic caution. Robert, I saw the article. Obviously, I know there are two sides to every story, but have you considered that maybe emotions are running high? Family disputes can feel clearer than they actually are. I explained the evidence, browser history, prescription bottle, financial motive. Richard listened, made sympathetic sounds, but I heard doubt in the pauses. Carol Henderson, who'd worked as victim advocate during my federal years, tried a different approach. I'm not questioning your judgment, but is it possible Eleanor's memory was affected by the trauma? Sometimes victims fill gaps with assumptions that feel like certainties. More phone calls followed, each one carefully supportive on the surface, questioning underneath. The media campaign was working. Jenkins called Monday morning with news. Brennan filed a countersuit. They're suing you and Eleanor for defamation, claiming your false accusations have destroyed Clara's reputation and Mark's contracting business, asking for $500,000. That's absurd. Of course it is. It's harassment litigation meant to create leverage, make you back down. But combined with the media coverage, he's building a narrative that might resonate with a jury. We need to be ready for this to get uglier. The asset freeze hearing was scheduled for Wednesday. Jenkins explained the strategy. We'd present evidence of financial motive, argue that Clara and Mark might hide or transfer assets to avoid paying damages. The court could freeze their accounts, prevent property transfers, protect our eventual judgment. But first, we had to survive the pressure. Tuesday afternoon, I ran into Thomas Kirby at the grocery store. Tom had been in my book club for 15 years. He saw me, hesitated visibly, then approached with an expression I'd seen before on witnesses who didn't want to testify. Robert, how are you holding up? Managing? He shifted his weight, looked at the floor. Listen, I don't want to overstep, but have you thought about mediation? Sometimes these family things, they seem clearer when you're angry. Maybe there's room for. Tom, I interrupted gently. My daughter tried to kill my wife for inheritance money. That's not a misunderstanding. His face flushed. Of course not. I'm just saying, well, the article made it sound more complicated than. The article was written by Clara's defense attorney. Right, sure. He trailed off. Then I hope it works out. He left quickly, abandoning his half-full cart. That evening, Eleanor found me at my desk reviewing evidence files. She sat down across from me, her expression steady despite the exhaustion visible in her eyes. "People are questioning you," she said. "Not a question." "Some are. Do you doubt yourself?" I looked at her, still fragile from the ordeal, still recovering but clear-eyed than I'd seen her in weeks. "Sometimes," I admitted. "When enough people suggest you're wrong, you start wondering." "Then let me be clear," Eleanor said, leaning forward. "I begged our daughter for help while I was dying, and she refused. That's not complicated. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder." Her eyes held mine. "Don't let them make you forget what actually happened." The doubt didn't disappear entirely, but her certainty steadied something inside me. Wednesday's hearing would tell us whether the court saw things as clearly as we did. Detective Miller's call came Wednesday morning while I was reviewing case files at the kitchen counter. "Mark cracked," she said without preamble. During this morning's follow-up interview, I was pushing on inconsistencies between his statement and Clara's, asking whose idea certain things were, and he just broke. I grabbed a pen, started taking notes. "What did he say?" Quote, "It was my idea to solve our financial problems, okay?" But Clara agreed. She knew what we were doing. Then his attorney jumped in, demanded we stop, but it was already on tape. I underlined the words on my notepad. "My idea," Clara agreed. She knew. "That's premeditation," I said. "And conspiracy." Exactly. Their defense just collapsed from the inside. After hanging up, I called Sarah Jenkins. She'd already heard from her sources at the DA's office, but she had additional information about what happened after Mark's slip. "Brennan pulled them both into a conference room at the station," Jenkins said. "Tried to have a private conversation about damage control." According to the officers standing outside, Clara's voice carried right through the door. She was screaming at Mark, calling him weak, asking how he could be so stupid to say that to police. And Mark yelled back that she wanted the money just as much as he did, that she helped plan everything, so why should he take the fall alone? She paused. Brennan couldn't control them. They turned on each other right there. "Two defendants blaming each other is a prosecutor's dream," I said. "I know. I've built cases on exactly this kind of fracture." Jenkins called again that afternoon with a proposal. The DA's office wants to make a tactical move. They'll extend an offer to Mark through his attorney. Reduce charges in exchange for full testimony against Clara. Conspiracy instead of attempted murder. 8 to 10 years instead of 15 to 20. "Mark's the weak point," I said, thinking through the strategy. "He's already cracking, already terrified. His gambling addiction, his pattern of poor decisions under pressure. He'll take the deal, but we need your authorization to coordinate with the DA." I walked to the study window, looked out at Tampa's afternoon light. Using Mark to convict Clara felt calculated, manipulative. But then I remembered Eleanor's account. Mark standing in front of the door while she begged for help, blocking her escape. The methodical cruelty of that moment. "Make the offer," I said. The offer reached Mark the next morning. Jenkins reported that Mark was seriously considering it, despite Brennan's advice to fight at trial. Brennan argued that turning on Clara would make Mark look worse to a jury, but Mark was caught between fear of prison and fear of being labeled a traitor. He asked for 48 hours to decide. While Mark deliberated, Clara made her own move. She retained a separate attorney, a woman named Patricia Vance, citing conflict of interest. Brennan couldn't represent both defendants if their interests diverged. Vance immediately filed a motion suggesting Mark was the primary actor, and Clara had been coerced or manipulated by an abusive husband. Jenkins explained it to me over the phone with something approaching dark admiration. "It's legally weak given the evidence, but it shows she's ruthless. She's willing to destroy Mark completely to save herself, fighting like someone with nothing to lose, which she doesn't." "I know," I said. "That's exactly who she's become." That evening, I sat with Eleanor in the living room and explained the developments. Mark's slip during interrogation, the plea offer, Clara's counter-strategy of blaming everything on him. Eleanor listened without interruption, then asked a question that surprised me. If Mark testifies against Clara, will she definitely be convicted? I considered it honestly. Not definitely, but probably. His testimony combined with the laptop evidence, the prescriptions your account, it builds a very strong case. She nodded slowly. Then I hope he takes the deal. Not because I want Mark to suffer less, but because I want to be absolutely certain Clara is held accountable. The clarity in her voice reminded me why I was doing this. Not for revenge, though that element existed. For certainty. For making sure what happened to her carried permanent consequences. My phone rang late that night, past 11. Jenkins's number on the screen. Mark's attorney just called, she said, voice tight with controlled excitement. He's taking the deal. Full testimony, complete cooperation, every detail. He's giving us Clara on a silver platter. I closed my eyes, absorbed the information. Across the room, Eleanor looked at me questioningly. I covered the phone. Mark is testifying against her. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles visible against the fabric. Jenkins continued. We're scheduling his deposition for 3 days from now. Once he's on record, Clara's defense is finished. She'd know it too. After hanging up, I sat in silence with Eleanor. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said what we were both thinking. It's really happening. Yes, I said. It is. The asset freeze motion filed Monday morning. I'd spent the previous day coordinating with Jenkins, reviewing the financial analysis Deanna Webb had prepared. Every debt, every late payment, every desperate cash advance in the 6 months before the poisoning. The document showed a family drowning and grasping for the inheritance. That would save them. The hearing happened Wednesday afternoon. Judge Martinez presided, reviewing the evidence with the methodical attention judges give to financial matters. Jenkins presented our case, $205,000 in combined debts. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Clara's called to the estate attorney 4 weeks before the poisoning. The pattern was undeniable. Clara's attorney, Patricia Vance, argued that freezing assets would prevent them from paying their mortgage, essentially guaranteeing foreclosure. Jenkins responded that they'd already stopped making payments. 3 months ago, the freeze merely formalized what was already happening. Judge Martinez granted the motion. All bank accounts frozen. No property transfers permitted. The house they'd pledged for bail was now untouchable, locked in legal limbo. They're financially paralyzed, Jenkins told me afterward. Can't sell, can't borrow, can't access savings. Everything they have is frozen until the civil case resolves. Mark's deposition was scheduled for Friday. I didn't attend. Jenkins advised against it, said my presence might complicate things. Instead, I waited at home while Jenkins and the DA's assistant handled it. She called me Friday evening with a summary. Mark gave us everything, Jenkins said. 47 pages of testimony. He described researching the drugs online, finding the prescription bottle from his anxiety treatment, forging a second prescription for digoxin by using his doctor's pad during an appointment. He explained mixing both medications in Eleanor's pasta sauce, and he detailed every conversation with Clara, how they discussed it for weeks, how she agreed it was the only solution to their debts, how she watched him add the drugs and said nothing. She was complicit, I said. More than complicit. She was a co-conspirator. Mark's testimony makes that absolutely clear. She paused. And before you ask, yes, we have corroboration. The laptop searches, the prescription forgery attempt we found in medical records, Eleanor's account of Clara refusing to call for help. Mark's testimony doesn't stand alone. It's supported by everything else. That evening, Detective Miller called with another update. Based on Mark's testimony, the DA filed additional charges against Clara, not just attempted murder, but also conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. An arrest warrant was issued Friday night. Clara was taken into custody Saturday morning. She paused. This time, bail was denied. Sunday brought an unexpected development. An email from Patricia Vance arrived in my inbox. Subject line: Confidential settlement discussion. I read it standing at my desk. Vance wrote on Clara's behalf, suggesting that perhaps there was room for resolution short of trial. Clara was willing to plead to lesser charges, maybe reckless endangerment instead of attempted murder. In exchange, we dropped the civil lawsuit. She emphasized that Clara was still my daughter, that families should find ways to heal rather than destroy each other. I stared at the screen for 30 seconds. Then I deleted the email. Eleanor found me there a few minutes later. What was that about? Clara's attorney suggesting we accept a plea deal and drop the lawsuit. What did you tell her? Nothing. I deleted it. Eleanor sat down across from me. Good. Don't let her pretend this can be negotiated away. She tried to kill me for money. That's not something you compromise on. Monday morning, I forwarded a screenshot of the deleted email to Sarah Jenkins with a simple message: no deals, no compromise. We proceed to trial on all charges. Jenkins responded immediately. Understood. I'll communicate that to the DA's office. Clara's attorney will get the message. The civil lawsuit continued its parallel track with the asset freeze in place and Clara facing upgraded criminal charges. Jenkins filed additional motions, one seeking to establish joint and several liability, meaning if we won the civil case, Mark would be responsible for the full $2 million, even though he'd taken a plea deal. The criminal reduction didn't absolve civil responsibility. That same day, the bank accelerated foreclosure proceedings on Clara and Mark's house. With no mortgage payments for 3 months and assets frozen, preventing any payment, the bank moved to seize the property. Notice to vacate was issued, giving them 30 days to remove their belongings. I heard about it from Diana Webb, who was still monitoring their financial situation. They're losing everything, she said. House, savings, any equity they had. The civil judgment will attach to anything that's left, which at this point is basically nothing. They gambled everything and lost, I said, not with satisfaction, just a mechanical observation of consequences. The following week moved quickly. Mark's formal plea agreement was signed on July 2nd. He allocuted in court, admitted under oath to conspiracy to commit attempted murder, detailed his and Clara's plan, and accepted 8 years in prison. The judge accepted the plea. Clara's preliminary hearing was scheduled for July 10th. Based on Mark's testimony, the laptop evidence, Eleanor's account, and the prescription forgery, the judge would decide if there was sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Jenkins assured me it was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, but Clara would be there in court. For the first time since her arrest, I'd have to see her face. Wednesday night, July 4th, Eleanor and I sat on our back porch. Fireworks exploded in the distance, neighbors celebrating. We watched in silence. Are you ready for next week? Eleanor asked. For the hearing? I thought about it, seeing Clara in the defendant's chair, hearing the charges read aloud, watching her realize how completely her plan had failed. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The story broke wide on July 6th. I was having morning coffee with Eleanor when the local Tampa station led with it. Daughter and son-in-law charged in poisoning plot. Inheritance motive alleged. The coverage was different. This time, no careful neutrality, no both sides framing, just evidence. Courthouse footage showed Clara and Mark being processed. The anchor detailed the forged prescriptions, The laptop searches, the inheritance calculation. A legal expert appeared, grave-faced, calling it one of the most cold-blooded cases in recent Florida history. My phone started buzzing. People I hadn't heard from in weeks, the same friends who'd questioned my judgment after Brennan's media campaign. Now they were calling to apologize, to express shock, to say they had no idea the evidence was so damning. I didn't answer most of them. Diana. Webb called mid-morning with updates on Clara and Mark's professional situations. The real estate agency cut ties this morning, she said. Public statement expressing sympathy for your wife and distancing themselves completely from Clara's alleged criminal activities. Mark was fired yesterday by the dealership, moral turpitude clause, and his parents released a statement disavowing him. I took notes while she talked, treating each detail as case information rather than victory. Employment terminated, professional reputation destroyed, family relationships severed. Consequences, not revenge. They're both completely isolated now, Diana said. No jobs, no social circle, no family support. Over the next few days, I learned more through various sources. Former friends stopped returning their calls. Neighbors avoided them in public. The statement from Mark's parents was particularly cold. We are devastated by our son's actions and choices. We support the victims in this tragedy and have no further relationship with Curtis. Formal. Absolute. Final. I understood it. They were protecting themselves from association, drawing a public line between themselves and their son's crimes. It's what parents do when their child becomes a monster. I wondered if outsiders saw Eleanor and me the same way, parents who'd somehow produced a daughter capable of murder. 8 days after Clara's arrest, I found a letter in the mailbox, not through attorneys, directly mailed. I recognized Clara's handwriting on the envelope immediately. Eleanor saw me holding it. From her? I nodded. We went inside. I opened it at the kitchen table while Eleanor sat across from me. 3 pages, handwritten. Clara's voice bled through every line. Dad, please. I know what this looks like. I know what I did was wrong. But everything spiraled out of control. The debts, the pressure, Mark's gambling. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never meant for Mom to actually die. I panicked. I'm so sorry. I've always loved you both. You're my parents. Please, isn't there a way to fix this? Can't we be a family again? The letter continued in that vein, part confession, part excuse, part desperate plea. I read it twice, looking for genuine remorse. I found only self-pity and manipulation. She was still framing herself as a victim of circumstances, rather than the architect of attempted murder. I slid the pages across the table to Eleanor without comment. She read in silence, then looked up. What will you do? I went to my desk and wrote a response by hand. 1 page, brief. Clara, you had a choice that night. You chose to watch your mother die rather than call for help. You chose money over her life. These were your decisions, made with clear intent. As the evidence shows, there is no fixing this. There is no family to return to. My attorney handles all future communication. I signed it, sealed it, and prepared it for delivery through Sarah Jenkins's office. No direct contact. No opening for negotiation or emotion. Jenkins called that afternoon with another update. Civil trial is scheduled for July 15th, 5 days from now. With the criminal case being finalized, the judge wants quick resolution. We'll get the full judgment, $1.5 million. They'll never pay it, of course. They're filing bankruptcy. The point isn't the money, I said. I know. It's the public record. Official acknowledgement of what they did and what they owe. Follows them forever. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing the civil case file one final time. Documentation of everything. medical bills totaling $197,000, Eleanor's suffering quantified in hospital days and therapy sessions, lost time measured in weeks of unconsciousness and months of recovery. Behind me, the door opened quietly. Eleanor stood there, stronger now, steady on her feet without the hesitation I'd seen weeks ago. "The trial is in 5 days," she said. I nodded. She crossed the room, sat in the chair beside my desk, the same position we'd held through this entire ordeal. "Partners in prosecution. Will you need to testify?" I asked. She considered it. "If it helps make sure they're held accountable, yes. I'll do whatever is necessary." Her voice carried no fear now, only resolve. I reached for her hand. She took it. The courtroom on July 10th was smaller than I'd expected for what the media had called one of Central Florida's most shocking cases. Judge Harrison presided, her expression neutral as the clerk called the matter. State of Florida versus Clara Evans and Mark Evans. Clara entered first, wearing a gray suit that looked borrowed, probably from her new attorney. Her face was drawn, eyes red from what I assumed were sleepless nights or tears or both. Mark followed, separate from her physically and legally now. His plea agreement had already been signed, but he was present for Clara's arraignment. The charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, attempted murder in the first degree, obstruction of justice. Each charge carried its own weight, its own maximum sentence. Added together, they meant Clara faced 25 years to life. Her attorney, Patricia Vance, entered a plea of not guilty, standard procedure, even when the evidence was overwhelming. The trial date was set for September 12th, 2 months away. But as we left the courthouse, Jenkins pulled me aside. "The DA thinks Clara will change her plea before trial. Once she sees Mark's full testimony and discovery, once she understands how completely the evidence destroys her defense, she'd take whatever deal they offer. Nobody wants to face a jury with this case." She was right. 3 weeks later, on July 31st, Clara accepted a plea agreement. Guilty to attempted murder in the second degree, 15 years minimum, possibility of parole after serving 12. The judge accepted the plea on August 4th. I was in the courtroom for the sentencing. Eleanor was beside me. We sat in the second row, close enough to see Clara's face when the judge spoke. "Ms. Evans," Judge Harrison said, her voice cutting through the quiet room, "you planned and executed an attempt to murder your own mother for financial gain. You researched the methods. You obtained the means. And when your victim was dying, begging for help, you refused to act. The only reason your mother is alive today is because a neighbor had the decency, courage you lacked." Clara's shoulders shook. Tears fell. But whether from remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. 15 years in state prison, the judge continued. "You'll be eligible for parole after 12, but that's not guaranteed. It depends entirely on whether you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation and remorse, qualities I see no evidence of today." The gavel fell. Clara was remanded immediately. I watched officers escort her out through the side door. She didn't look back at us. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to see. Mark's sentencing happened the same day. Despite his cooperation, the judge gave him 8 years, acknowledging his testimony but noting that he was the primary actor, the one who actually administered the poison. He'd be released in 2033 if he served his full term without parole. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic after the criminal convictions. With guilty pleas on record, the civil judgment was a formality. Jenkins presented our case on August 15th. Medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, the permanent impact on Eleanor's health. The defense offered no real contest. What could they say? Judge Martinez awarded us $1.5 million. the full amount we'd requested. Collecting it was impossible. Clara and Mark had both filed bankruptcy. Their house had been foreclosed and sold at auction. Bank accounts were empty. Future earnings would be garnished, but prison wages barely covered commissary. "We'll never see a dollar of it," Jenkins admitted afterward. "But it's on record. Public acknowledgement of harm done and debt owed. If either of them ever earns money, inheritance, lottery, book deal, whatever, we can pursue it. The judgment doesn't expire." That night, Eleanor made dinner. Simple pasta, not the dish Clara had poisoned, but close enough that the parallel wasn't lost on either of us. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared understanding rather than empty conversation. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked after we'd cleaned up. "The lawsuits, the prosecution, cutting her off completely?" I thought about it honestly. "No, I protected you. I made sure they faced consequences. I'd make every choice again, even knowing she's your daughter? Especially knowing that. She used family as cover for attempted murder. That makes it worse, not better." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I feel the same way. I thought I might feel guilt or doubt by now, but I don't. Just relief that it's finished." We stood at the window in our living room, looking out at Tampa's evening lights. The city continued its normal rhythm. People heading home from work. Cars streaming along the highway. Life proceeding as it always had. But for us, everything had changed. Not in obvious ways. We still lived in the same house, still had the same daily routines, but the foundation underneath had shifted. We'd faced something most people never encounter, betrayal from within the family, an attempt on life from someone who should have protected it. And we'd survived. More than survived. We'd ensured accountability, built protections, created consequences. The inheritance Clara had tried to murder for would never touch her hands. Our wills now directed everything to charity. The house she'd counted on inheriting would benefit strangers instead. Was it worth it? Eleanor asked quietly. "Everything we lost?" "We didn't lose everything," I said. "We lost a daughter who was willing to kill you. That's not a loss. That's removal of a threat." She leaned against me. "I suppose you're right." August turned to September. Life resumed its patterns. Eleanor continued physical therapy, regaining strength she'd lost during the hospitalization. I returned to occasional consulting work, helping young investigators with complex cases. We had dinner with friends who'd stood by us through everything. The media moved on to other stories. Clara and Mark became footnotes, cautionary tales about greed and family betrayal, but no longer headlines. Sometimes I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the child who'd sat on my shoulders at the beach, who'd called me for advice, who'd once been someone I trusted completely. That person was gone, had been gone for a long time, probably. I'd just been too close to see it. What remained was a woman in prison serving 15 years for attempting to murder her mother. That was the truth of what she'd become. Accepting it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One evening in mid-September, Eleanor and I stood at the same window where we'd stood after the civil trial. The view hadn't changed. The city lights still spread below us, indifferent to our story. "Do you think about her?" Eleanor asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly I think about what might have happened if Leo hadn't called for help. If you died that night and they'd gotten away with it. But that didn't happen. No, because we fought back. Because we refused to let them rewrite the story." Eleanor turned to face me. "Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for not letting family loyalty override the truth." I took her hand. "You're my family. You're who I protect." We stood together in the gathering darkness. Survivors of something that should have destroyed us but didn't. The wound would never fully heal. Scars like this don't fade. but we'd ensure that the people who caused it paid the appropriate price. That was enough. If you were gripped by this story of betrayal and justice, please like this video and subscribe to the channel Winds of Thought. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know in the comments. To hear our next tale, click the video on your screen now.